Hello, sir. John Robb here, interviewing Andy, formerly from Eater.
These are tapes that we were left in an attic, basically. Dave Goodman, who was the Sex Pistols producer, he also produced us. And when we recorded our album, there was a load of stuff left off it, and it was just the bare bones backing tracks, which I've never really, I've never been able to listen to it. And after the guitarist Brian left the band, we were in a state of flux, and I think the other two members of the band were already thinking about splitting with various other musicians. It was a mad time, and in that time, there was a weekend that me and Dave spent in the studio, where he finally allowed me to lay the guitar overdubs down that were all been missing from the album. And it was such a rush job that, after that, forgot all about it, really. We found a new guitarist. We then split up within kind of months of that, weeks of that. And it all went wrong. So I thought no more of these recordings. When we got given the tapes from Dave's sister, who found them in her mum's attic, I had to have them all transferred to digital and stuff like that. And it sounds better than ever, basically. It's to me, it's what the album should have sounded like. And so, it's an amazing thing for me. I hope other people will agree, but I think they probably will.
Yeah, it does sound great. Of course, it's got the energy. That was the easy bit, but they sound big and punchy. And actually sound sort of oddly contemporary. They don't sound like the museum pieces that you'd expect them to.
I think they stand out as, I think the perfect punk rock album, basically. And I think a lot of people will look at Eater in a different light, and quite deservedly so. I don't even understand, to be honest with you, why anybody liked our debut album anyway, because it was full of holes, and it was just vaguely okay from a band that people had very low expectations from, when I knew it should have been a lot more than that. So I know, purists like their stuff. I'm not so sure that avid record collectors that kind of buy all the versions of everything, which, I used to be, but as a kid, I'm not so sure that they care that much. I would hope not. But I'm hoping that the kind of newer generation of punks will rediscover the band, and it will mean probably more to them.
I think an older record, just despite the flaws of any record, it's usually a snapshot of the time, and it's an accidental snapshot of the energy of that moment. And that's kind of what intrigues people. Whether it sounds perfect or not, it's a completely different question.
Yeah. But I mean, when you're doing something, you want it to sound as good as you can make it. And it's a bummer when you don't get the opportunity to do that, for a multitude of reasons. It wasn't just because of Dave being a stoned hippie, it was also because, and he didn't really give a fuck. He just wanted to get product out quickly, and I don't think he would have cared what it sounded like. But, also we were so young that I wasn't thinking, well, I've got to be on the ball on this one, I've got to take control. It was all just, I still can't believe anybody's fucking paying us to do this.
So what have you done to it to change it? What's actually been the process here? Is it, I don't quite guess. I mean, I listened to the tracks and they sounded great, but I'm just trying to work out what...
The overdubs were just put onto the master 2-inch.
Okay, so you've got the old tapes, you've overdubbed them and remixed them. Is that the process?
Basically, yeah. And it's there's a lot of technology available now that, as you probably know, that's quite fucking amazing what you can do in mastering, and so everything's been boosted and given a bit of depth. It sounds like the difference between a kind of apparition, and a full-bodied kind of manifestation. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's just a million times better. What can I say?
Did you remix it as well? Do you change? Did you get right into the bones of it? Get right? Yeah.
There's limitations, but yeah, as much as we could, and there were different takes as well. So it was a long process of choosing which take to use. And because at the time it was just overdub after overdub. It wasn't a case of listening to the song back after you've done it, just back onto the next one, onto the next one, onto the next bit, rather the next bit, next bit, next bit. And you know, I wouldn't have been able to. I did consider maybe I should just play guitar and, you know, stop being the singer. But I like jumping around singing, and I also knew there was no way in fucking hell I would be able to sing and to do all these lyrics. So, but yeah, so it was just a frantic kind of run through, and I never really got to appreciate it, apart from a little snippets I heard at the time. I never got a chance to hear even the proper run through. So I was just blown away, you know, amongst what started out as a load of outtakes from different sessions and other things, and the second album demos and stuff that was suddenly, you know, I was thinking what I could do with those, whether it's worth it or not. But, you know, it was just great.
I mean, was this a Dave Goodman thing, doing lots of overdubs? Because, I mean, I remember going to his house once and he played me all the Pistol stuff he'd done. You know, you can hear there's castanets in there and loads of little guitars you can't even hear in it. So was this part of his method? Was this something he liked doing?
I mean, he did like producing. You know, he was when we met him, it was his first real, apart from the Pistols, chance in a studio rather than just doing live sound, and which is what he was really doing. So, but he did have delusions of grandeur when it came to producing, and he wanted to be the Phil Spector of punk, and you know, hand claps and tambourines and piano here and there, some acoustic guitar. But he spent so much time indulging himself, he didn't listen to what the song actually wanted or what I wanted, you know. And because I was just kind of thinking, well, I defer to the grown up in the room kind of thing. But yeah, he was like that. And I got to know him, you know, I stayed friends with him for years and years after, until his death. And whenever I went round to that studio, he, as you know, he had like sitar over there and a fucking strange instruments all over the place. And he got into all that kind of stuff. I recorded an album with him, actually, that I'm glad it didn't get a proper release.
Was it the kitchen sink? Yeah. So, I mean, how old were you? I mean, you were super young then, when you was about 14, 15 when you were making... 15
when it started. Dee was only 13. The drummer, Degenerate, was only 13. And then the oldest, me and Brian, the guitarist, we were 15. We went to school together. You know, that's how the nucleus of the band really. Then we met Ian Woodcock, the bass player, through an advert in the NME. And he was the oldest one at 17, which I thought was a bit, because I stated very clearly in the advert, no older than 16. And because I wanted people to join the band who were still all learning from scratch kind of thing. No kind of former jazz heads, no former fucking, you know, heavy melodies, whatever. Just, this is what we're doing from scratch. There is no history to this. And so it was lucky, actually. That was a stupid plan, because then you just get a horrible fucking racket and no songs. So Ian did kind of thread it together and made it kind of a lot more kind of muscular, you know. And he knew his stuff. It was good. In
a sense, it's like, this is really punk in its most purest form, isn't it? It's genuinely teenagers, genuine, never picked up guitars before, totally into the idea of it and making records as fast as they possibly could. It's almost perfect conceptually.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, to me, that's the no baggage thing means a lot, because a lot of bands like the Vibrators and Stranglers had been around for a while. But the Vibrators weren't really a punk band; they were playing whatever. And although I liked those bands, you know, I like aesthetics, you know, with things. And if there's a little kind of link there that could have been improved on, but you know, that's got what we got. But with Eater, it really was, you know, just from standing jump kind of thing, from nothing to being suddenly in a band, not even a musician, you know, just nothing to being in a band or being school kids, basically.
It's actually amazingly competent considering all that.
Well, I mean, looking back on it, it looks like a fucking master plan, you know, everything that we needed. There was always a way to get it, you know. It's like we knew that our parents couldn't buy guitars for us to start. Because we decided that we needed a bass, 2 guitars, me for lead guitar, Brian for rhythm guitar, and this bass player we didn't yet have. we organised this robbery basically to get the guitars. So we started casing out the local music shop in Finchley, and every day at 5:30, the manager would go to the back and he'd put his coat and hat on in a room. He'd spend about 5 minutes, come back. We watched this 3 times. We thought, right, it's perfect, you know, because that's all we need. 5 minutes, grab 3 guitars when we're out there. So, and it was late, you know, September, so it was kind of nice and dark by 5:30. And so we executed the first robbery perfectly. Me, Brian, and my younger brother, who did most of the work. I must admit, I pushed him in to grab the things, but he didn't get the bass the first time. So 2 days later, we came back and did the same thing and got the fucking bass as well. After that, they put wires around all the guitars. And
I hope you took them back a few years later.
No, they got sold for rat scabies.
Oh, right.
It was our fence. I was worried for weeks afterwards that it would be in the Finchley Press, you know, guitars stolen from shop. And then an article did appear, but it was tiny. I thought, well, that's good. And then, like, stupidly, a month later, I'd phoning around trying to get press for the band. I phoned the Finchley Press and said, do you want to do an article on our band? And they said, yeah. So they came and took pictures, and we're holding these guitars with our hands over the make, you know, so it wouldn't fucking be obvious where these guitars. But nothing happened. I often wonder what happened to the manager.
The shop, yeah. Maybe
must have got it in bed, wasn't it? Twice.
Those pesky kids. So, I mean, you didn't come out of a musical vacuum because you've been into music before and you're quite well versed in music, and it's kind of glam rock like a lot of people, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, glam rock was my thing. You know, that was the thing that I got into music because of. You know, and I think the same as with Brian as well. Ian was a bit more, you know, proper rock.
I mean, what kind of glam rock you listen to? The classic sort of glam rock, you know, the
Dave Goodman was a huge Gary Glitter fan, you know, who was always wearing a Gary Glitter t-shirt. And it would have been just right for fucking Gary Glitter, wouldn't he? But
too old.
So yeah, glam rock really. Sparks were my kind of obsession, you know, and then all the other bands like Alice Cooper and David Bowie and all of them. I was nearly said the Rubettes, but actually no, I didn't actually like the Rubettes. I thought they were stupid.
So you even had an aesthetic then. I mean, so it's I mean, obviously you couldn't go to see any of these bands because you'd be too young. So were you like a Top of the Pops kid, or would you be able to sneak into a couple of gigs as you got to?
It's amazing how many gigs you can get into from 14 onwards. You know, in those days, I went to see. You know, the first gig I went to was to Queen at the Rainbow when I was 14, and that was fucking brilliant. That blew my mind. That did. I loved Queen after that, and yeah, and then Sparks in the Rainbow again because I lived in North London. It was the Rainbow was the main venue to go to. But yeah, I mean, no one ever seemed to check. I don't ever, well, maybe twice getting chucked out of a pub for not being old enough, but most of the time, I mean, we played at venues that we weren't really at age to play. I mean, The reason we didn't play at the 100 Club Festival is because the only landlord promoter out of all of the venues in London that didn't want to dabble with the underage laws was Ron Watts, who managed the 100 Club, and so he didn't put us on, but he knew we were drinking it there. So I don't know what the kind of thinking was behind that, really.
Yeah, you can't go on the stage, but you can go 10 feet away. Yeah,
exactly.
I mean, did you always want to be in a band in the glam rock days, or did it seem so unattainable?
I wanted to be a music journalist first because I thought, you know, I didn't think I had any chance of, because I couldn't play anything and, you know, didn't know. So yeah, I wanted to write about music, and I remember writing to Melody Maker, a guy called, I think it's called Alan Clark, who I write and said, how would I get into writing for a music paper? I'm, you know, 12 years old. I live in Finchley, blah, 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 blah. And he sent me a very nice letter back saying, encouraging, I can't remember what it said, pretty insipid really, but at least he wrote back. But then punk happened, and that sort of changed the whole thing, you know. And we nicked the guitars just before it really happened. I think. I mean, I can't actually remember whether it was after the very first article or just before that. But anyway, it coincided. So that was obvious because Johnny Rotten said, "Don't need to know how to play." And I said, "Fucking hell, you're speaking to me." And we knew we had to learn very quickly. And so we learned very rudimentary kind of chords and wrote, actually, you know, some of the songs written were nice songs, they're good songs, but the execution wasn't always that brilliant. And that kind of kept growing. But we would, you know, we could have done with 6 months lead up to doing all of this rather than doing it all sort of in the public eye. And some of those things, I mean, the Live at the Roxy performance was fun, but I don't want to listen to it. Why anyone else would choose to listen to it, I really don't know. But
they're not listening to the mistakes; they're feeling the energy. That's so
well, you're not listening to what's going on in my head on stage. You know, it sounds much better than that. That wasn't the fucking sound, I'll tell you.
Well, if you sounded like Queen, you know, at the Rainbow, it would sound so out of place. Yeah. How important was your background? I mean, you're Anglo-Egyptian, aren't you? I mean, was that a factor in this at all?
My dad was very, very, and that's another factor why I managed to. It became a reality, more of a reality, was because my mum and dad got divorced. So my dad moved out of the house, which was very handy because my mum was a pushover, and my dad could not impose his strict laws, and so. Not that he wasn't like a devout Muslim or anything like that, but he was kind of, you know, he came from that culture, and it was difficult to for him to get his head around why we had pictures of David Bowie on our walls with his testicles hanging out. You know, he had all those pictures removed, and he bought us some porno magazines to stick those pictures up instead. And then my older sister comes in and removes all of those because she says, "You can't have those on your wall." So we had no posters on our wall in the end. But yeah, it was.
So what was your upbringing like? Was it quite strict when you were younger, like before your teenage years?
When I was really young, probably a little bit. Not like beatings and stuff like that, but more like, you know, the belief in God and Islam and all of that kind of thing was. I took it as read that everybody was like that. You know, everybody got told these things. Everybody knew what a mosque was. Everyone knew what. And it was only when I started going to school at about 5 that I got a horrible wake-up call and realised I had a fucking stupid name as well, because my birth name's Ashraf Radwan, right? So Ashraf is a name that is, you know, it's an Arab name, a Muslim name. So I thought it was normal, but then I found out why. You know, painfully bit by bit, why I didn't fit the mold because I looked white, you know, and yet I've got these. And every fucking lesson I'd have to stand up and start explaining to the new teacher why I've got funny name. It really got my tits. So that got changed as soon as I became Andy Blade. That was like, right, that sort of. But so it was weird in that sort of way, but more than any strict kind of stuff. Well, although we weren't allowed out. Outside the perimeter of our garden fence up until about the age of 11 or something. I think that's maybe quite strict. But but then when he went, it was chaos after that.
Yeah.
That was.
Yeah, I was going to say you made up for it very quickly.
Yeah. My mum didn't know what she was taking on, but she was actually really supportive. She came to a couple of gigs against my wishes. She came to the Hope and Anchor one time, and I didn't know she was coming with my sister, for fuck's sake. And they were apparently dancing. I got someone rushed in the dressing room and goes, "Hey, your mum's out in the mosh pit and she's dancing with you." Says, "For fuck's sake." It's like, no.
So did you feel quite alienated before punk? And was like music a space for you to find your identity? Or did you still feel, to this day, do you still feel quite, is there an Egyptian part of you as well?
Yeah, I relate a lot to you know, other people, you know, Arabs that I've met, Moroccans, and you know, other Egyptians, and I always feel there's a kind of certain affinity there, which is always quite nice, and they're always really interested to know, you know, because I don't seem like I am from, you know, anywhere weird, and so they're very pleased, you know, and so it's a nice kind of thing, but you know, I don't really it doesn't, that part of my life is such a fractional part. It's not really a big issue or anything like that, or never really was. Because at the time when these things are going on, you always think this is normal anyway. So, it's only looking back, you think, well, that was a bit hard. When my sister said that she would never allow me to visit her at her home unless I converted to Islam, that was a bit harsh. But, we've made up now.
Yeah. And
that she wouldn't do. Well, there's another great one, was that she wouldn't stick up for me if I was caught drinking in Saudi Arabia, because I would have broken Islamic rules and she would have seen me hang. She said, but I don't believe her. I don't believe her.
Wow, that's pretty strict. So in punk, were these things an issue, or is it just everybody's in it together, or did you actually meet other people, those kind of interesting sort of backgrounds? I mean, I know Polystyrene's one off the top of my head.
Yeah, not really. There's a kind of maybe a subliminal kind of recognition sometimes with certain people that fitted a similar kind of mold. But now, and punk meant a lot more than it does now, as far as the attitude rather than what we're wearing, and so all of those considerations weren't important really. And it wasn't someone said there was someone on GLR that was talking about how there was the gatekeepers at these movements are always keeping out, certain races and stuff like that. And that really is not true. There was, if anything, what would have prevented me would have been my dad. He was the gatekeeper, you know what I mean? Not my school, or not my, I skirted around them easily enough.
And what was your first experience of punk? Was it something you read in the newspapers, or was it something you've seen around London or Finchley?
I thought John Ingham's in an article on the Sex Pistols. He did a 2-page interview. It's the first one. I'd read a couple of little NME reviews. I think there was a Paul Morley review, short little thing, but then there's this whole 2-page spread, and I thought, wow, and that was the one where he says, and you don't need to play. I want bands to be popping up all over the place, and so you learn 3 chords. So I immediately thought, well, that's sorted then. So I phoned up Sounds. I got in touch with John Ingham, and I was really good at self-promotion. And again, that's another thing that I never realised at the time. I just thought you just got to do these things, And so he was actually interested, because I thought he'd probably say, what, some school kid band from Finchley, fuck off. But because I said I think we're a punk band as well, and he took all the details down and was really interested. And so he asked loads of questions, about what do my parents think, and when are you playing gigs? Do you play gigs? And as it had turned out, I'd wangled this gig with the Buzzcocks in Manchester that was just coming up, and so he thought, probably, fucking hell, they're really right in there with the only reason the Buzzcocks were involved in it is, I'll kind of put it in a nutshell, was because we asked for posts. We'd arrange, stupidly, we wanted to do a gig, so we booked a hall in Manchester called the Holsworth Hall, thinking that's good enough. I thought in my head, we're far enough away from home to not make fools out of ourselves, and there'll be a usual crowd there. But I didn't know how gigs work, that people actually would need to want to go and see the band. And because no one had heard of ETA before, and especially not apart from our school, they're not in the Manchester area, no one knew. But so I inquired to this poster company, and they put me in touch with Martin Hannett and the crew around the Buzzcocks. And through them, as soon as I found out that they were Buzzcocks crew, I thought, fucking brilliant. And so they suggested, well, why don't you, instead of doing this gig that no one's going to turn up to, why don't you play with the Buzzcocks? But I insisted that we've got a headline, which was stupid, because the Buzzcocks had a good following by then in Manchester, and they'd be coming to see the Buzzcocks, not us. And so they didn't argue that point, because they thought that, well, that gives us all the responsibility of finances, and we've hired the hall, and we're paying for the posters that they're doing for us. We're paying for the adverts they're putting in the paper for us. And so they just took all the door money at the end of the night. They had their man on the door, and we never got paid a thing. Never even got our money back for the hall. But it was a learning experience. It was terrible, terrible, terrible gig for us. Buzzcocks were brilliant. But, we definitely should not have gone on last. You don't do that. That's stupid.
No. So it's always been a weird anomaly. I mean, I live in Manchester, and it's always been one of those gigs that how did that work? I mean, Buzzcocks are pretty. But yeah, how did you? So now I know the story of how you managed to headline the gig. I mean, Buzzcocks themselves had only played about 5 gigs at that point, hadn't they?
Yeah, I think maybe even less than that. I mean, it really was. Well, it was September '76, so however many. But yeah, it was at the beginning. Howard DeVoe was still in the band, of course, and he was great. Yeah. He came after. He could see I was really upset afterwards in the dressing room because I knew. Basically, what happened was after about the 3rd song, when I realised this is just going down the toilet, because they were heckling us and abusing us, the people that were there, throwing things out, sandwiches and half-eaten bits of bread and shit. I started doing it, we started joining in, throwing it back. The bass player that we'd only just met that night, who didn't even know our songs, walked off. And me and Brian and my brother were just chucking things back, going, "You northern fucking wankers, you chimney sweep cunts, get out of here." And they were going, "Southern bastards." It turned into a riot, and it really did look like a riot was going to happen. And so we got ushered off by Howard, and the rest said, "Call it a day, call it a day." And I was slumped in my chair afterwards in the dressing room, and he came over and sat next to me, and he's going, "Don't worry, Andy." He goes, "He's brilliant, Andy. He was brilliant." But I thought he was just trying to make me feel better. But I can see his point now, what he meant by situationally quite brilliant, because it was. It was a dreadful gig, but it was memorable. But, yeah.
How did you even get there? I mean, did you get there on the train? I mean, it's a logistic nightmare.
On a national coach. On a national coach, that was pre-D, so my younger brother was still playing drums. So we put all the drums and our stolen guitars into the back of the coach with a set that we'd rehearsed in my bedroom, and we just travelled up there. And it's I mean, you just wouldn't do those things. It's just such stupid things to do. But if we hadn't done all of those things, it wouldn't have happened. And there's another, I was quickly telling you about the other, our second gig was much better, because it was the first time we were proper eater with Degenerate and Ian. We found a bass player in the interim, plus Degenerate joined through Rat Scabies, through John Ingham. Rat Scabies introduced us to Degenerate, who was his protege. He'd been teaching to play drums. And so I thought, right, well, I'll organise a gig at our school, because that would be a great way to get. And also I wanted Slaughtering the Dogs to come down from Manchester as well, to kind of make it a 3. So the Damned topped the bill. I spoke to all these people and I said, "Would you do that? You up for that?" And they all said, "Yeah." And then I said, "Okay, it's on." So all the press started going, the adverts started going in the press. And of course, I hadn't asked permission of the school at all. I hadn't told anybody at the school. All I told was the people at school that were going to be coming, and the guitarist. And so somehow we got away with it. The Slaughter turned up in their little bus, and the Damned were fucking brilliant. We went on first this time, having learnt our lesson, and it was a great set, and everything went smoothly. No, there was no comebacks. I mean, can you imagine doing that nowadays? Putting on three. One teacher found out on the very same day. He came up to me and he goes, "I saw something in Time Out saying punk rock special at the Finchley Manor Hill School," and he goes, "I'm going to have a word about this." But he either didn't or he did, and they didn't bother. But I don't know how we got away with it. But those things just kept happening, and if those weird things hadn't happened, then, as I said, we would have fallen. And I thought at the first hurdle we should have fallen, really. The guitar robbery should have been a bust, and we should have ended up in like juvenile or something.
I mean, what's your relationships with other bands like? I mean, you're a whole 4 years younger than most of them, which is a big deal at that time, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a big deal. I mean, just 1 or 2 years. I mean, Slaughter they were our nearest in age group, and but being 17, they were around 16, 17. So we kind of got on with them on that level, but we were very kind of adversarial about it. And they came to Finchley. We invited them down to Finchley to see our hood from Withenshaw down to posh Finchley in North London, and they weren't impressed with our hood at all. In fact, that a very boring night for them. All the things that I promised would be happening, the chicks, the booze, the drugs, nothing happened.
Probably like most nights.
And they realise he's just a bullshitter like we are. We've fallen for it.
Well, that was a great thing about punk, because people were creating their own narrative as they went along, weren't they? Create their own myths.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm a photographer now. Here's my card.
Yeah.
There's lots of them. All the people that couldn't get into bands were photographers suddenly, or journalists, or fanzine writers, or whatever. And it was great. It was good fun, and it was like a lot of the characters were really. I'd love to know what happened to a lot of the characters, because there's some funny people.
Sorry. As you were making this, as you like to put the band together and writing the songs, how would you even know what a punk band sounded like? It's not like now you just go and Google it, or this. You just read an article. I mean, you'd seen a couple of bands.
It didn't. See, the thing is, it didn't seem to be about a certain sound to me. It was more, fast was in the mix, and short. And so all my songs that I'd written, in my bedroom, in the years before, or, a year before, I basically, as soon as Dee joined, they were just sped up 100 times and shortened. And so it was really quite easy. I mean, it was quite an easy process. My drummer, the original drummer, was just funereal pace all the time, and Dee was just like 1, 2, 3, 4, and it was that's sorted then, and they converted quite well, because they're actually good songs. They made the grade, so it was quite easy to get with it. The close was easy as well. It was just create your own thing out of what you've got available to you, and raid the Oxfam shops and tear things and add things and sew something on. And because my mum was a dressmaker, so she was pretty handy, I'd give her things and say, I'd like a zip that goes diagonally across that. And everyone would say, where'd you get that? They don't sell that to dictionaries. And I'd say, no, they don't.
I mean, do people take you seriously? I mean, or did you find that people just sort of patting you on the head for being like quite young?
No one really took us seriously. It was a bit annoying. We became friends with a lot of the bands, and the Clash, were very, and certain members of the Pistols were very friendly, as mascot like we were little mascots, rather than, we weren't a threat. We weren't kind of, we weren't in competition like they were with each other and the other grown-ups, because we were so obviously naive young dickheads, that didn't know what we were doing, but seemed determined, and so we got on with everyone. There was no, apart from Slaughter, let's say, which there was a little bit of friction there sometimes, but yeah, it was very friendly and a kind of open-ish scene for a while, but then it became just overloaded and saturated, and the press got hold of it, and and the rest is history.
I mean, did anybody take you under their wing?
The Dam, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Because Rat used to be Dee's teacher, drum teacher. So it wasn't quite as professional sounding as it was. Basically, Rat was friendly with Dee's mum, who had a son who wanted to learn the drums, and he said, "Okay, I'll teach him," and he taught him really well. And so because of that, we went to all the early Dam gigs, and of course they played with us at our second gig at school, and so we were in with them very early on, including the people at Stiff Records, and their kind of maybe. So all their crew sort of knew us, so they were all inside people. And then because we then got this call out of the blue from Dave Goodman, who'd seen our advert for the bass player, wanting a bass player, and he's a bass player, but he wasn't phoning up to offer the job, thank God. But he said, "Oh, you're a punk band, are you? I'm the Sex Pistols producer, and I'm forming a label with Johnny Rotten called Rotten Records, and we'd like to hear you and see if we want you on our label." So I thought, this is amazing. This is suddenly the heavens have opened and everything's happening for us. And it later turned out that Dave was lying about Johnny Rotten's involvement in the label, and it was actually he knew nothing about it. We approached him later that day at the ICA. Chelsea were playing there, and Caroline Coon had become a kind of confidant by then, and I phoned her up with the great news that we were going to get signed up to Rotten Records, and she said, "What? I've never heard of this." She knew all of them, very well, and she said, "I'd really be suspicious of this, Andy." And so she really burst the bubble, and I didn't want to believe it. I thought, no, she's fucking lying. They are going to. And so it was my chance to confront Dave Goodman at the gig later that day, and all of the scene were there, you know, the Pistols, and Chelsea were playing. It was with Gene October. I mean, when it was with Billy Idol, you know, the first incarnation, the proper incarnation.
It was Chelsea. The last night, wasn't it? It's the night that they left.
That's right,
yeah.
And so everyone was there. So we went. I turned up with Brian, and they probably thought, "Oh God, it's those fucking idiots again." And I go over to where Johnny Rotten's holding court with his acolytes, all like cackling along to his asides, and Brian's going, "Go on, say something." So I launched into this kind of, do you know a guy called Dave Goodman? And it went on from there. And are you good? Basically, he just started laughing, and he said, "Never trust a fucking hippie." I remember him clearly saying. And he said, you know, it's not happening. He looked a little bit sorry for us because he could see how deflated I looked, because I thought he was going to say, "Hey, Andy, welcome to the fold, welcome to Rotten Records." And that didn't happen. So Dave then shows up about an hour later after we've got used to the idea, thinking what we're going to do about it. And so we had two options, which was to confront him about it and definitely blow our record deal, because we would, you know, if there really was a label there at all, we'd offend him, basically. We'd be worried about fucking offending him because he lied to us and we didn't want to offend. So we chose the soft option, to totally ignore it. And but apart, you know, I said something like, "John wasn't sure about Rotten Records." "Oh, I didn't tell you that. Yeah, something happened about it. Blag, 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 blag." And he never knew whether to believe Dave was right and whether they really had an argument about it, and now he's not doing it or whatever. And because we were just 15-year-old kids, we should have been at home revising. And so we went along with it. So we got ripped off, really. We got ripped off Rotten. That's one thing for sure. But we didn't get signed to Rotten Records.
But I guess it gave you some kind of experienced producer, didn't it? I mean, was there other options? Was there anywhere else this could have gone?
Yeah, I mean, if we hadn't been signed up, they signed us up early on, right? So when we put that advert in for the bass player before Ian, that was 1976, and that they offered the deal very soon after that, and we signed it before even recording anything. And so it then took another 6 months to get our first single out. And you know, people go on about first singles is important in the punk thing. We could have had a much earlier. I think we might have beaten or been on the same time as the Damned one, but I don't give a shit about that. But it was stupid of them to have waited, you know, because they were setting up the label. They had no idea. Dave Goodman and his partner Caruso, this guy that used to be a DJ in Japan, he turns up in London with a suitcase full of cash, and he wants to invest it in something. So they decided to form a record label based on this new punk rock craze, or around it, you know. And so we happened to be the first band through Dave's initial lies before they had even properly formed the company. We were kind of already on the hook, and so they started putting quite a lot of money into it, but they didn't know how to do it. It took them ages to work out how to get distribution and stuff like that. And so it took 6 months for Outside View to come out, and but it did really well when it did come out. But you should have got it out earlier, and the album would have been out earlier as well if that had been the case. But
yeah, I mean, it's amazing, isn't it, that you actually were one of the first punk bands, weren't you? I mean, normally the 14, 15-year-old kids, that's the second wave, isn't it? That's the people who buy the records, take a year for them to soak in. But you're right there in the first 10 punk bands of the whole movement, aren't you?
It's so, I guess it's amazing, but it's I still can't think of it as amazing, because it all just seemed coincidence and you know, some weird timing that made everything just tie in together. But yeah, but it's the other downside of that is that was, I think, for me anyway, I think that was the best time of punk, because it wasn't just defined as a certain thing. There were very different bands with the Subway Sect, you know, and the Pistols and the Clash and the Damned are very different to them. Eats were very different to all of them, and the Buzzcocks and everything. So that was good. That was a healthy kind of blend, if you like, but things, you know, an organic scene can't grow too quickly, or it gets fucked up quickly, and that's what happened. It suddenly, and because it got given an identity by the press, you know, the tabloids saying punks do this, punks do that. I remember seeing a Daily Mirror A to Z of what to do, you know, as a punk.
Yeah.
And you saw the people turn up, you know. I'd see like one week they weren't there. All of a sudden there was like loads of these fucking idiots from all over the place turning up in bin liners, and you know, and to me that was the beginning of the end. Although there are a few good bands that came out of that. It defined punk as something that it wasn't, and I think that's what it is still defined as now, as something that, you know, I think they've got it slightly wrong.
I mean, did you have an audience? Did you get a following? Did you get like 12-year-old kids looking up to you as a veteran very early on?
Because we had a really young audience, because we got into a lot of the teeny press. A lot of our audience couldn't come and see us, and so we played mainly to indifferent, older, you know, more suspicious music fans who also thought once the kind of gate, the doors were open and it got flooded, everyone just liked punk, and it didn't really matter whether you were called Eater or Lurkers or Damned or whatever. And it's kind of stayed a little bit like that ever since. I'm sure there's quite a lot of Eater fans, I hate to say this, that I don't really think are Eater fans. I think they just like punk rock, because if so, like, goes back to that thing about the original version of the album, they would realize that wasn't any good, because I literally think it's no good. I'm not being nasty about it for no reason, and I can only think that they think it's good because it fits in with all the other punk rock stuff, and it's of its time and blah blah blah, which is fine, but to me it's not liking it for the right aesthetic reasons.
I think the more you dislike your own record, the more punk rock it's becoming.
maybe. But actually, I love Ant, the version of it that's coming out. So I don't hate that one by any means. But I always love the songs, and it's, you know, do you know what I mean? If you wrote something and somebody kind of got it out before you were ready for it, you'd be fucking pissed about it. It doesn't matter how much someone likes about it. It's almost like someone having your diary and they're saying to you, I really like what you did on April the 4th, 1972. Yeah. I'm glad you liked it, but you weren't supposed to fucking read it.
I mean, where was it going to go? I mean, did you see Eater something that could actually develop? And I know it was very of its moments, but there was hints there was something slightly beyond the simplistic nature of it.
Yeah, there definitely was. I mean, lyrically, I'm amazed actually at a lot of the lyrics are really good. They really stand up. They're not embarrassing schoolboy prose, which they should be. And the ideas I had, definitely, you know, the sound is always about the sound that was in my head. It doesn't, when we were playing live, it didn't matter so much that it wasn't being executed just right, because you got all the energy with it. But in the studio, you know, I really wanted, but I was too young really and too novice at it all to get to grips with all of that. But yeah, I mean, because the songs stand up so well, I think that proves something, you know. And people aren't wrong to like Eater, but really they should love Eater for the right reasons, because it's such a great story and it's such a great kind of album that has been produced. And if we'd carried on, it would have been boring. We would have become more kind of musician like and jaded and not doing stupid things anymore, you know, not having to blag your way to get gigs. And I would have become, I mean, we were all like 16 by then, so we would have become fucking star tripping ego maniac. Well, it was bad enough as it was. D got pretty bad. I wasn't very good either. I suffered from ego. It would have taken me. I would have died. I'm pretty sure I would have ended up a cropper if Eater had become huge, if we'd carried on. But it changed. I mean, Eater was very much just that brief period of time when it all kind of clicked and the right people were involved in it. And, you know, any later developments couldn't be the same anymore, because we wouldn't be 15, 16 anymore. We wouldn't be novices. We wouldn't be, you know, doing it just because we want to do it like this, you know, and fuck you. And so I'm glad, you know, I think a lot of the best bands have just one album, and leave it at that. The Pistols being a good case in point.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, it was perfect. Probably not for them, but perfect from the outside, wasn't it? I mean, so when you say you had a sound in your head that you couldn't quite achieve, what's that sound? Can you still hear it in your head?
Yeah. It's that. It's got Mick Ronson playing guitar on it. It's got one half of the Glitter Band drummers on it. It's got Bill Nelson is in the band. Bowie's written a few bits and pieces here and it, and Lou Reed's lurking somewhere in there as well.
So it's still very much steeped in that glam theme.
Yeah, but well, I mean that's how I hear it. But it often comes out completely. There, you can hear now my stuff nowadays. You can hear glimpses of that guitar sound or whatever. But my stuff tends to take peculiar. As I've developed as a songwriter, I try to get it more right, and my songs tend to change. You know, they're not all that uniform, and lyrically, it's I'm a writer anyway, so I love words, and I've always wanted to write when I was a toddler, and so I like playing with words, and it's definitely a progression of what I was doing with Eater. I mean, I didn't have any schooling to write songs or to play an instrument or anything like that. Everything was from albums and stuff that I'd got into. And so I didn't have to write the lyrics that I wrote. There was some strange lyrics. There's tracks like Space Dreaming. It's a very strange song with some odd lines in it. You know, there's definitely no, I've split up with my girlfriend. I've never kind of wanted to write about anything, because Sparks were a big influence. So they always write about little crises, you know, little dramatic stories that someone's made a contract with the devil, you know, and they've got to get out of it kind of thing. So, you know, with Eater, there's some weird stuff. The B side of our second single, Michael's Monetary System, is a kind of like a fairy tale set to a weird kind of Pink Floyd beat. And this is like, you know, 1977 came out, and it's me narrating this strange fairy tale about a boy that wants to convert the monetary system into buttons instead of money, and red the most expensive, by the way. But so
great, that's great.
Yeah, I don't know where it comes from, but because I wasn't taught it. But I'd say from what things I liked, and a lot of those things I liked tended to be glam bands. So
I mean, the years later, you made your own. You done about, is it about 3 albums you done?
4 albums.
Solo albums. Yeah. So did you feel like you ever escaped from the clutches of punk, and do you think in a way that was? So you keep getting dragged back into the mire, or do you find it's still an inspiration in a way?
It depends what you call punk, really, because to me, I've continued being punk, you know. So when I started like that, with that attitude and with that I'll do things my way kind of thing, it's the songwriting has very much remained the same way, the same attitude. To me, it's just got better, but it's the same attitude that is, to me, is what punk is. And that doesn't mean I've worn studded leather jackets through the 90s or had a Mohican at any point, or most of the time I just look like normal. When you say, does the punk thing affect me? It affects me in the other way, which is the nostalgia thing keeps coming back, you know, with the rebellion gigs and the kind of movement that it is now. It's kind of, there's this strange punk movement, which call it punk movement, but it's nothing like that, you know, that little scene I was just talking about, but it's still nevertheless a punk movement. And the only thing I've got to do with it is that I'm respected, I guess, as a legend from back in the day, and the Eater is a staple album, just like any student going on a course at university would have A to Z of linguistics as their chosen thing for that year. And so it's kind of an honor in one way, but it's kind of a slightly jaded honor, and it's cool, it's fine, but it's not the same thing. I have to think, I hate that thing that when with bands now, with like a lot of artists, they've gone to trouble for things. It's like, when was it that you had to actually agree with everything that person ever thought in private when you bought their first record? You know, you didn't know anything.
Crazy,
about
isn't it? Well, that's the opposite of punk, isn't it? That attitude.
Yeah, but I get a bit of flack from some of those punks that are in that kind of rebellion every year scene, and And I don't understand why. I'm just saying it. I'm not saying die, you know.
Yeah. So what's it like now? Because now you've become a veteran, which is really odd because you spent your whole life talk about a band that was the youngest punk band you could possibly have, impossibly young. And now you're at the other end of the scale.
Yeah, but we're still the youngest band out of that lot, I might point out. So we've retained that. We're now old, a bit younger. But well, I don't see. I don't actually feel like I'm 60 now. I feel somewhere around 40, I guess. And yeah, but that took a long time because when I was 40, I was still 16. So so I don't feel old, but age is only kind of a thing that comes up when it's kind of mentioned, and I think, oh shit, yeah, fuck.
Yeah.
It's also funny when you look back on old pictures, because at the time you always think, I don't look good, I don't look good. I've got no confidence in my looks. But when I look back at old pictures, I think I looked all right. I'm fucking horrible now. I looked all right then. I shouldn't have been so hard on myself.
Does it change your creativity? Is it the way you create is different?
Well, being older, yeah, obviously it has, definitely, because what I love about being older is that I'm a lot wiser now, and also I'm better at certain things now, and so that all plays off, very nicely. But in every kind of way. I mean, when I look back at myself over different stages of my life, from 15 to 30 to 40, a lot of times I just think, what the fuck, what the fuck was I thinking? Why did I risk that? Why did I do that? What made me so scared that I did that? Or, and it's like I feel at a place where things like that wouldn't affect me so much now. There's been a lot of shit that's gone down over the last, few decades, that some of it quite serious. It's an ESA related story, but my marriage ended up fucked, and I won't go into detail, but my guitarist, my original best school buddy, Brian, he ends up with her. So that was a very, very difficult thing because we had young families at the time. And that's probably, out of everything that's ever happened to me, that's like the most horrible thing. And it took a lot of getting over that because, a lot of thoughts cross your mind when something dramatic like that happens and you suddenly find out something in very kind of dramatic circumstances. And that took a lot of time. But it still pained me. I was still like fucking in real pain for a long time. And even over lockdown and stuff like that, when you can't see your kids at certain times, because the family's not together anymore. And so it makes them conflicted with who to spend Christmas with and all that shit. But I look back on it and I wonder how I didn't crack more. But all those things I think are kind of tests, aren't they, in a way?
Yeah.
Got some tests, surely.
Does that taint your memory of Ita as well? Surely it must.
Well, of course, that affects a lot because he was my blood brother, With my wife, with my ex-wife, I kind of forgive her for all of that. I never blamed her anyway because I cheated on her and I got my own karma in that respect. But with him, I've never done anything apart from, be his mate and him be my mate. And we were always on the same level. And, he didn't let us down with Ito when he would show up at stupid arranged things that I'd done. And he didn't say that idea is fucking nuts. Maybe, actually, it might have been good if he did say that. But you know what I mean? He was like solid. And so that was just very fucking difficult to understand. Whatever the fucking excuse is, it's like very difficult to get over. He'd probably agree. It makes it a bit difficult, we get on a certain level, kind of that joking level that we've always got on, that we just automatically switch into. And it's cool, really. And definitely now it's cool, but it was difficult. It was very difficult.
I can imagine.
There's other band conflicts that would make Ita kind of reunion impossible as well. Not that I would want to do that anyway, but we're not pretending that we're all still kind of in the gang and we're all mates together, and like a lot of the bands out there that are still doing it.
I mean, do people give you offers to reform even to this day?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's gigs and stuff like that. But you know, they know by now, like that I wouldn't. You know, I've kind of nailed my cross to that one because I've slagged the whole idea of reformed bands so many times now that I couldn't face the flack. So, but you know, like again with Eater, the great thing about it is that the whole concept of it and everything, and with this album coming out, that's far better than going to see, you know, listening to that's far better than going to see a bunch of 60-year-old men. So yeah, it's kind of a nice legacy, really, but it's been a lot more complicated than I ever would have thought, or a lot longer lasting than I ever would have thought that it would when I started off thinking about, read that Sex Pistols article, want to sit laying on my bed. If I'd have known that I was like pressing the button on something that was going to go like that and stay with me my whole life, I don't know what I would have thought. I wouldn't have believed it. I definitely wouldn't have believed it.
It is really curious, isn't it? Because yes, the band was really young, but also punk was meant to be such of the moment, flash in the pan culture. It was the whole point of it. It is really bizarre how it's become history and a museum as well.
Yeah, there is actually a museum that's opening up in Vegas, isn't there? So, but yeah, no, I mean that's a weird side thing that I've got nothing to do with, that I don't understand. I mean, I remember at the time when punk was happening, there were adverts in the press like announcing rock and roll revival reunion tours featuring the drummer from the Crickets, you know, with somebody that used to play bass and whatever. And I thought how stupid that was. And I remember speaking to, I can't remember who it was, but someone at one of the bands saying, you know, can you imagine punks having a festival? Can you imagine this happening? And it was like just a joke, a complete and utter joke, that to even think of it. And in fact, there was a spoof piece once in Sounds where they actually announced a festival where all these bands like Eater are headlining on the third stage. And it was a joke, obviously. The fact that it's going on now is, I do find weird, but you know, a lot of things in life are weird. So